The feasting had concluded in Sinbad's grand hall in Baghdad. The air, thick with the scents of roasted meats and perfumed smoke, grew quiet as the guests turned their attention to their host. Sinbad the porter, now a regular and honored guest, leaned forward, eager to hear how the wealthy merchant had once again tempted fate after the horrors of being buried alive on his previous journey. Sinbad stroked his beard, his eyes reflecting the flickering lamplight as he gazed back into the past. "My friends," Sinbad began, his voice a resonant rumble, "you might well ask why a man, having secured wealth beyond measure and survived unspeakable terrors, would ever leave the comfort of his home again. I asked myself the same question many times. For a while, the quiet life in Baghdad was enough. I reveled in the company of my family and friends, trying to wash away the memories of the crypt with music and laughter. Yet, as the months turned into a year, a familiar restlessness began to stir within me. The comforts of the city began to feel like shackles. I found myself wandering down to the Tigris docks, watching the great dhows unfurl their sails, bound for exotic lands whose names tasted like spice on the tongue. All the troubles and calamities I had undergone could not cure me of my deep-seated inclination to explore the world and engage in trade. The passion for novelty, the lure of the unknown horizon, again prevailed over prudence. Therefore, I decided to undertake a fifth voyage, but this time, I determined to do things differently. I would not be a mere passenger subject to the whims of another man. I traveled to the finest seaport in the realm, Basra, with a vast quantity of gold. There, instead of booking passage, I sought out master shipwrights. I remained in the port for many months, overseeing the construction of my own vessel. She was a magnificent ship, built of seasoned teak and cedar, with tall masts and a hull designed to weather the roughest seas. When the ship was finally ready, smelling of fresh tar and new rope, I loaded my goods on board. However, my own stock, though substantial, was not enough to fill the immense hold of this new vessel. I did not wish to sail with empty space, so I put out a call and agreed to take with me several other merchants of different nations, honest men looking for passage for themselves and their varied merchandise. We became a floating marketplace, bound for the distant east. We sailed with the first fair wind, the white canvas billowing proudly above us. After a long and prosperous navigation across the open ocean, where the sea was a brilliant blue and the flying fish leaped around our prow, we sighted land. It was a small, uncharted desert island that rose low against the horizon. The captain I had hired to navigate my ship brought us in close, and we dropped anchor in a calm turquoise lagoon. Curious to explore this untouched land, many of the merchants and I took the ship's boats ashore. We found the island uninhabited by humans, a quiet place of scrub brush and sandy dunes. As we explored inland, we came upon a sight that stopped us in our tracks. There, nestled in a massive depression in the sand, was the egg of a rock. It was equal in size to the one I had seen on my second voyage, a titanic white dome rising from the earth, smooth and gleaming in the sun. My heart pounded with a mixture of awe and terrifying memory. I knew the danger this represented. As we approached cautiously, we could hear a faint tapping sound from within the shell. The egg was just ready to hatch. The beak of the young rock had begun to break through, creating a crack on the surface. The merchants whom I had taken on board, men who had not seen the wonders and terrors I had, were overcome with a foolish and destructive curiosity. They rushed forward with axes and hatchets they had brought for cutting wood. "Stop!" I cried out, running toward them, waving my arms frantically. "I earnestly entreat you, do not meddle with that egg. The parents are monstrous birds of unimaginable power. If they return and find their nest disturbed, they will destroy us all." But they were possessed by a madness of curiosity and greed. They would not listen to me. Ignoring my desperate warnings, they attacked the giant egg with their hatchets, chipping away the thick shell until the unhatched chick was exposed. It was a massive creature, even unfledged, its eyes blinking in the sudden sunlight. In their frenzy, they dragged the heavy creature from its shell. I turned away in disgust and fear as they desecrated the nest, taking souvenirs of the giant shell and feathers, sealing our fate with their thoughtless actions. Scarcely had they finished their destructive work when a shadow fell over the island. We looked up and saw, appearing in the air at a considerable distance, two great clouds moving against the wind. The captain, who had remained by the boats, shouted to us, his voice shrill with panic. "Run! Those are not clouds. They are the male and female roc, the parents of the chick. Re-embark with all speed or we are doomed." The merchants, finally realizing the folly of their actions, dropped their ill-gotten prizes and fled back to the beach in terror. We tumbled into the boats and rowed furiously back to the ship. We hastened on board, hauled up the anchor, and set sail with all possible expedition, praying for a swift wind to carry us out of danger. In the meantime, the two immense rocks approached. They let out a frightful, piercing screech that shook the very masts of our ship. The noise redoubled in fury when they reached the island and saw their broken egg and their nest destroyed. They circled the island once, their massive wings casting dark shadows over the land, and then they flew back in the direction they had come, disappearing for a time into the clouds. We made all the sail we could, the ship groaning as we pushed her to top speed, endeavoring to prevent the misfortune which I knew unhappily awaited us. I stood on the poop deck, watching the sky with dread. It was not long before they returned. We observed with horror that each of the monstrous birds carried between its enormous talons a rock of a stupendous size. Boulders bigger than the largest cannons. They flew at terrifying speed and came directly over my ship. They hovered there, blotting out the sun. The female rock was the first to let fall her stone. We watched it fall, a growing black dot against the sky, whistling as it plummeted. By the dexterity of the steersman, who spun the wheel violently at the last second, the ship swerved and the immense rock missed us by mere inches. It plunged into the sea right beside the hull with a deafening roar, creating a wave so massive that the ship nearly capsized, tossing us about the deck like dolls. We had barely recovered our footing when the other rock, to our ultimate misfortune, threw his burden. He dropped the second, even larger stone with deadly precision. It struck exactly upon the middle of the ship, smashing through the decks and the keel, splitting the sturdy vessel into 1,000 pieces. The air was filled with the screams of men and the sounds of splintering timber. The mariners and passengers were thrown into the churning sea. Many were crushed by the impact or dragged down immediately by the wreckage. The ship, my beautiful vessel that I had built with such pride, vanished beneath the waves in moments. I myself was cast into the water, gasping for air amidst the debris. I thought my end had come, but as I surfaced, thrashing wildly, I fortunately caught hold of a large piece of the mainmast that was floating nearby. I clung to it with the desperation of a drowning man. For the rest of the day and throughout the long night, I was at the mercy of the currents, kicking with my legs and paddling sometimes with one hand and sometimes with the other, to keep my makeshift raft headed toward a distant green shape on the horizon. By the grace of God, I came to an island and managed to scramble safely ashore, exhausted and half drowned. I crawled up the sandy beach beyond the reach of the tide and collapsed upon the soft grass under the shade of some palm trees to recover myself from my fatigue. I slept deeply, dreaming of giant shadows blocking out the sun. When I awoke, the sun was high. Feeling refreshed but ravenously hungry, I went into the island to explore it. It seemed a veritable paradise, untouched by man. I found trees everywhere, some of them bearing green, unripe fruit, but others heavy with delicious ripe fruits of colors and shapes I had never seen before. There were streams of fresh, pure water meandering through lush meadows filled with flowers. I ate of the fruits, which I found excellent and nourishing, and drank deeply of the cool water, thanking Providence for saving my life yet again. When I was a little advanced into the interior of the island, near a beautiful, clear brook that wound through a grove of trees, I saw a figure. It was an old man who appeared very weak and infirm. His skin was wrinkled like dried leather, his long white beard was matted, and he was wrapped in tattered leaves. He was sitting on the bank of the stream staring forlornly at the water. At first, I took him to be another unfortunate sailor who had been shipwrecked like myself. My heart went out to him in shared misery. I went toward him slowly so as not to startle him, and saluted him politely, offering a traditional greeting of peace. He did not speak, but only slightly bowed his head in acknowledgement. I sat down near him and asked him gently why he sat so still in this lonely place, and if he was in need of aid. Instead of answering me with words, he made a series of pathetic signs. He gestured to his weak legs, then to the fruit trees on the other side of the brook, and finally pointed to my broad shoulders. He signified that he wished me to take him upon my back and carry him over the brook, so that he might gather fruit which he was too frail to reach on his own. Seeing his apparent age and decrepitude, I believed him really to stand in need of my assistance. I felt it was my duty to help a fellow castaway. "Come, grandfather," I said kindly, "I will help you across." I knelt down before him so he could climb onto my back with ease. He crawled onto my shoulders feebly. I stood up, balancing his light weight, and waded across the shallow stream. Having carried him over, I bade him get down, and for that end, I stooped low again, that he might get off with ease. But instead of doing so, and I curse my naivety every time I think of it, the old man, who to me had appeared quite decrepit and helpless, suddenly moved with shocking speed and strength. He clasped his legs nimbly about my neck. His leathery shins locked together like iron bars across my throat. He sat astride upon my shoulders and squeezed so tightly that I thought he would have strangled me right then and there. My breath was cut off. Black spots danced before my eyes. The apprehension of immediate death made me swoon, and I fell down senseless onto the grass. When I regained my senses some time later, I found to my horror that notwithstanding my fainting, the ill-natured old fellow had kept fast about my neck. He had not moved an inch. Seeing I was awake, he opened his legs just a little to give me time to recover my breath, but still kept a firm grip. I gasped, trying to pull his legs apart, but they were like bands of steel rooted to my flesh. When I had recovered my breath sufficiently, I tried to argue with him, to beg him to release me, but he spoke no word. Instead, he thrust one of his bony feet hard against my stomach and struck me so rudely on the side with the other that pain shot through my ribs. By these vicious prods, he forced me to rise up against my will. Thus began my wretched enslavement to the old man of the sea. Having arisen, he made me walk under the trees, guiding me by kicking my sides as one would ride a donkey. He forced me now and then to stop, that he might gather and eat the choicest fruit from the high branches he could not reach before. He ate greedily, tossing the rinds down at me. He never left me all day. I was forced to carry him hither and thither, my back aching, my spirit broken. When I lay down to rest at night, exhausted by the burden, he laid himself down with me on the grass, holding always fast about my neck, his weight a constant suffocating pressure on my chest. I could scarcely sleep for the misery of it. Every morning, as soon as dawn broke, he pushed me to make me awake, and afterward obliged me to get up and walk, pressing me with his feet to hurry my pace. I became his beast of burden, trapped in a nightmare from which I could not wake. Days turned into weeks, and I despaired of ever being free of this silent parasitic monster. One day, while trudging through a part of the island I had not yet visited, carrying my silent tormentor, I found in my way several large dry calabashes, gourds that had fallen from a tree and hollowed out in the sun. An idea began to form in my mind, a faint glimmer of hope. While the old man was busy eating fruit, I managed to pick up a large calabash unnoticed. Later, when we were near a vineyard filled with wild grapes which abounded in the island, I gathered a large quantity of the grapes. Finding a secluded spot, I cleaned the calabash and pressed into it the juice of the grapes until it was full. I put the stoppered calabash by in a convenient sunny place and left it there to ferment. I waited for several days with growing impatience, enduring the kicks and the strangling grip of the old man. Finally, going thither again some days after, I retrieved the calabash. I uncorked it and smelled the pungent, heady aroma of strong wine. I tasted it and found the wine excellent and potent. I took a long draught. The fiery liquid warmed my blood and soon made me forget my sorrow for a moment. It gave me new vigor and so exhilarated my spirits that, despite the burden on my back, I began to sing aloud and even dance a little as I walked along the path. The old man on my shoulders, perceiving the sudden effect which this liquor had upon me and feeling that I carried him with more ease and buoyancy than before, became curious. He leaned forward to look at the calabash and made me a sign that he wished to know what it was and to have some of it for himself. I handed him the calabash with a feigned look of obedience. The liquor pleasing his palate, he drank it down greedily. It was a considerable quantity of strong wine, and as he had likely never tasted such a thing before, the fumes got up into his head very quickly. He became intoxicated. He began to sing after his own strange, croaking manner and to rock back and forth on my shoulders, laughing hideously. As the liquor took greater hold of him, his muscles relaxed. I felt his iron grip loosening. His legs, which had been clamped around my neck for so long, began to uncrossing and slip down my chest by degrees. I waited for the right moment. Finding that he did not press me as before and feeling him sway precariously, I reached up with all my remaining strength, grabbed his legs, and threw him off my shoulders with a mighty heave. He fell heavily upon the ground, where he lay in a drunken stupor, unable to move or defend himself. I looked down at the creature who had enslaved and tormented me, who had stolen weeks of my life and reduced me to a beast. The rage that had been building in me erupted. I saw a great stone nearby. I picked it up high and brought it down upon his head, ending his miserable life and freeing myself forever from this troublesome fellow. I was extremely glad to be thus delivered from that living nightmare. I felt light as a feather, though my neck and shoulders were bruised and sore for many days. I now walked toward the beach, hoping to find some means of leaving the island. To my great joy, I saw a ship anchored offshore. A boat's crew had just landed on the beach to take in fresh water from a nearby spring. I ran toward them, waving my arms. They were surprised to see a ragged man emerge from the trees, but they were more so at hearing the particulars of my adventures when I recounted them. "God be praised for your deliverance," the boatswain of the crew exclaimed, looking at me with awe. "You fell into the hands of the Old Man of the Sea. He is a legendary terror among mariners. You are the first person we have ever heard of who escaped being strangled by his malicious tricks. He never quits those he has once made himself master of till he has destroyed them through exhaustion and despair. He has made this island notorious by the number of men he has slain over the years. You are truly fortunate." After having informed me of these things and letting me drink my fill of their fresh water, they carried me with them in their boat to the ship. The captain, an honorable man, received me with great kindness when they told him what had befallen me. He gave me fresh clothes and food, and I rested for many days as we sailed. He put out again to sea, and after some days' sail with favorable winds, we arrived at the harbor of a great bustling city, famous for its high walls and busy markets. I landed with the crew, but I was once again penniless and alone in a strange land. However, one of the merchants aboard the ship, who had taken me into his friendship during the voyage and heard my story, took pity on me. He invited me to go along with him and carried me to a large caravanserai, a place appointed for the accommodation of foreign merchants. "Look here, brother," he said kindly. "I know you have lost everything. I wish to help you restart your fortunes, for you are a resourceful man." He gave me a large, empty sack. Having recommended me to some people of the town who were gathering in the courtyard, men who used to go into the forest to gather coconuts, he desired them to take me with them. "Go," said he to me, "follow them and act as you see them do, but be careful. Do not separate from them. Otherwise you may endanger your life, for the forest is deep and dangerous." Having thus spoken, he gave me provisions for the journey, and I went with the group of gatherers. We walked for some hours until we came to a thick forest of cocoa trees. They were very lofty, incredibly tall palms with trunks so smooth and straight that it was not possible for any man to climb to the branches where the fruit grew high above. When we entered the forest, we saw a great number of apes of several sizes. They were chattering noisily in the treetops. As soon as they perceived us, they fled with surprising swiftness, swinging from branch to branch, and climbed up to the very top of the highest trees, where they sat watching us. The merchants with whom I was, without saying a word, picked up stones from the ground and began to throw them with some force at the apes high in the trees. I was puzzled at first, but then I understood the stratagem. I did the same, throwing stones up into the canopy. The apes, who are naturally mimic creatures and easily angered, were provoked by this assault. Out of revenge and a desire to retaliate, they grabbed the only missiles available to them, the cocoa nuts hanging around them. They ripped the nuts from the stems and threw them down at us so fast and with such wild gestures as sufficiently testified their anger and resentment. It rained coconuts around us. We dodged the falling fruit and then calmly gathered up the coconuts from the forest floor. From time to time, when the apes stopped throwing, we threw more stones to provoke them again. By this clever stratagem, we filled our bags with valuable coconuts, which it would have been impossible otherwise to have gathered from such heights. When we had gathered our number and our sacks were full to bursting, we returned to the city. The friendly merchant who had sent me to the forest bought the whole sackful from me, giving me the full market value of the coconuts I brought. "You have done well," said he. "Go on and do the like every day until you have got money enough to buy goods and carry you home." I thanked him heartily for his good advice and assistance. I continued this trade for some weeks, going daily to the forest with the gatherers. I gradually collected a vast quantity of cocoa nuts, selling some for daily expenses and hoarding the rest. At last, I had accumulated as many coconuts as produced me a considerable sum of gold. Hearing that a vessel was ready to sail for my home regions, I secured passage. It was the same vessel in which I had come, now sailing with some merchants who loaded her hold with coconuts, which are rare and valuable in other parts of the world. I embarked in her all the nuts I had remaining and, when she was ready to sail, took leave of the merchant who had been so kind to me, thanking him one last time. We sailed out of the harbor and headed toward the distant islands where pepper grows in great plenty. We stopped there, and I exchanged some of my coconuts for a large quantity of high-quality pepper. From thence we went to the famous Isle of Comari, where the best and most fragrant species of wood of aloes grows. I exchanged the rest of my coconuts in that island for valuable wood of aloes. While at Comari, I also engaged with other merchants in a pearl fishing expedition. I hired professional divers, paying them with some of my pepper. They brought me up from the deep seabed some pearls that were very large, pure, and perfectly round. With this newfound wealth stowed safely in my chest, I embarked in a vessel that, after a long but gentle voyage, happily arrived at the port of Bassorah. From thence I traveled by land caravan and returned at last to Baghdad. I realized vast sums from the sale of my pepper, wood of aloes, and fine pearls in the markets of Baghdad, becoming even richer than before. As was my custom, upon my return from my other voyages, I gave the 10th part of my gains in alms to the poor and to build mosques in gratitude to God for my deliverance from the rocks and the terrible old man of the sea. I then endeavored to dissipate my fatigues and forget my harrowing experiences by indulging in amusements and festivities of different kinds with my friends and family. When Sinbad had finished his story, the guests sat in awed silence, contemplating the horrors of the old man of the sea. Sinbad ordered his treasurer to give 100 gold sequins to Sinbad the porter, as was his custom. "Take this, my friend," Sinbad said, "and go home to your family, but return tomorrow, for the tale of my 6th voyage is even more wondrous than the one you have just heard." Sinbad retired with the other guests, marveling at the merchant's resilience. Next morning, the same company returned to dine at Sinbad's house. When dinner was over and coffee was served, Sinbad requested their attention and gave the following account of his 6th voyage.